Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. If you see Adam Klasfeld and he's in front of a courthouse, that's not a phony AI backdrop. That means he's in a courtroom today, and you know the one that he's in front of today. It's the one involving James Comey, the former FBI director. There were so many bombshells that went off against the Department of Justice today. I'll give you one, and then I'm going to turn it over to Adam, who was actually in the courtroom. He'll give you the stuff that only comes, that color that only comes from being inside of a courtroom. But at some point, we finally got to hear from Lindsey Halligan. It's like a silent movie star. We finally got to hear her voice, except she ended up effectively becoming a witness for the defense as she was grilled by Judge Nachmanoff about the peculiar case of the two indictments and how the second indictment came to being. I'll leave you with this. I'll turn it over to Adam Klasfeld. Did all 14 grand jurors who voted to indict Comey actually see the indictment that was delivered as the indictment?
No, they did not, Michael.
And as we were joking, and I want you to work it in, as we were joking, you said before we got on the air that this was like that Monty Python skit with the Black Knight, and right. I want you to explain what you're talking about.
It's just a flesh wound. I'm sure that we could fit that clip in there. Well, in Monty Python's The Black Knight, there is a duel with the Black Knight, and the Black Knight loses one arm. He keeps fighting. He loses his second arm. He keeps fighting. He loses his leg. And the knight is, why are you still fighting? But still fights until he is deprived of all limbs and says, well, we'll call it a draw. It is becoming farcical, and that is probably the most charitable way to put it. Every day that I am inside of this courthouse or looking at this court docket, there seems to appear a new viable way to attack the James Comey indictment. And the new attack that emerged today is the fact that, as you noted, Michael, the grand jury never saw the indictment that became United States versus James Comey.
All right, stop right there. For those that don't, because that is so momentous. See, even the trains are excited in your area. Okay, right. This is how it works, folks. You get what's called a true bill of indictment. It needs to come from usually 14 or a majority of your grand jurors. They have to have seen the document. A jury foreperson signs as a proxy on behalf of the people that voted for it, and you deliver that to the magistrate judge. If that didn't happen in any of that order that I just described, you don't have an indictment.
Right. And so the last time we spoke with me in front of this courthouse, Michael, this was during the disqualification hearings for Lindsey Halligan. And at the time, we learned that there was a more than 2-hour gap in the grand jury record because Lindsey Halligan had presented the case to the grand jury at 4:28 p.m. The indictment is returned at 6:40 p.m. Today, we got a little bit more detail about that because the judge grilled first Halligan's assistant, Tyler Lemons, and then Halligan herself in the only words that she uttered during today's hearing about what happened in between, because we know that there were two indictments. The first one, the grand jury no-billed the top count. Then apparently, before being presented with the second indictment, a number of grand jurors went home. And according to Lindsey Halligan, the only people who actually saw the second grand jury indictment, which was essentially an edit of the first indictment,
they had paste indictment.
Exactly. It was, since they no-billed the first count, they had presented a second indictment with the count one, what was count one, removed. But and
by the way, before you move on, we knew, you, me, and our audience knew, back when the original reporting about the magistrate judge who was responsible for overseeing this process, she said to Lindsey Halligan at the time, and I'm paraphrasing, why do I have two pieces of paper that are both indictments that you both signed? Because there's only supposed to be one signed. And she says, I didn't sign the second one. She said, you did. Here are two. How did that happen? Then fast forward, Judge Curry last week questions, why is there a gap? Where did the 2 hours go when you were getting the second indictment? Lindsey Halligan thinks she's helping herself but actually she hanged herself by filing an affidavit in that matter. She said, "Judge, you're wrong. That's when the jury was deliberating. I never had any more contact with the grand jury." We learned today that's a lie. She had contact with the one grand juror left milling around and the jury foreperson, for which there was no transcript. And the magistrate judge underneath this Judge Nachmanoff, he commented yesterday or the day before, where is the transcript of how you got the second indictment? How did you get the second indictment? So that is what he picked up with today when he grilled Halligan, right?
Correct. And Halligan, that declaration, it should be noted, was ratified twice by one Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now, this was right now, when she gave that revelation, when she confirmed on the record that the grand jury who brought U.S. v. Comey did not actually see the indictment that became U.S. v. Comey, Comey's attorney came up. And one of the first words after that was revealed, he said that essentially there is no indictment against that is against Mr. Comey right now.
Michael Dreebens, right?
Yes.
Michael Dreebens for Comey jumped up, as we would all do in the defense. We'd say, "Judge, we have no indictment." Now, let me explain to our audience what that means, because some people might be thinking, rightly so, because they've watched Law and Order. Why can't they just go back to the grand jury and fix it? Because we're out of time. Because if everybody will recall, they were up against a clock. 5 years from September the 5th of 2020 is when Comey made the statement. You only have 5 years until September 5, 2025 to get your indictment. If you don't, it doesn't relate back. You don't get to do it over. And we're now in November, meaning the indictment, not only would the indictment be dismissed, but there'd be no game over. There'd be no charges against Comey because of the screw up in procedure.
And one more point on that, Michael, because last week when I was here in this courthouse, the government argued that the statute of limitations was told once an indictment was returned. But the question that is now very much active is was there ever an indictment? Because the actual case that became United States versus Comey was not viewed, was not seen by the entire grand jury. It was seen by the foreperson and another grand juror.
2 out of 14 doesn't do it while everybody else is home, but taking the train home. To your point, I agree with the case law that they're relying on. If you have a proper indictment and you need to get a superseding indictment down the road or another indictment, that would stop the clock. You wouldn't be under the statute of limitations problem because it would relate back. But if the thing you got was never an indictment at all, that doesn't stop the clock. You effed it up. It's a legal term. You effed up your indictment. You didn't get your true bill returned in time, and now you're out of luck. And that's the fight going on right now. But our audience might be thinking, well, but that's not the Monty Python skit. That's only a flesh wound. What else happened today? That's not the only thing that happened. Mr. Lemons made a confession that he didn't want to make to the judge about the existence of a certain memo, right?
Well, what he said, he tried to avoid when asked point blank about a declination memo. Now, folks might remember, ABC News, I believe, was the first to report on the existence of a memo explaining why every prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, the career prosecutors, Halligan's predecessor, Eric Siebert, did not want to bring that case, known as a declination memo. Judge Nachmanoff wanted to know about that. And Tyler Lemons, the assistant for Lindsey Halligan, declined to disclose whether or not it existed. Judge Nachmanoff pressed, why can't you say that? Why are you saying that it might be privileged? And he's saying, based on conversations with the U.S. Attorney General. So the Attorney General's office is instructing him not to disclose whether or not the declination memo that has been widely reported exists. And by the way, and I think both of us have made this point, Michael, in this and other broadcasts, there is not a single prosecutor to this day from the Eastern District of Virginia, save for Lindsey Halligan, who may or may not be actually a prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, who would take this case. So
Tyler Lemons, talk about not being able to make lemonade out of lemons. Sorry, I had to go there. He's not even from Eastern District of Virginia. He's from North Carolina. And he came tap dancing up here to try to convince the judge. By the way, he conceded that he read a draft of what we call the declination memo, which is a career prosecutors looked at the case and gave Lindsey Halligan, upon her arrival, a memo that recommended that the prosecution not go forward, that there was not a case under the Department of Justice manual to be brought against James Comey or really Letitia James either. Despite that.
I will say he would not disclose the existence of it. He did say that he said that he looked at a prosecution memo, but we know that a declination memo exists, one, from prior reporting, two, by the fact that there is not a career prosecutor in this district willing to take this case. I think what was so damning about what he actually said in court is that for whatever reason, the Eastern District of Virginia and Pam Bondi is instructing him not to disclose the existence of this widely known, widely reported prosecution.
Didn't he say Todd Blanche in the room? Yeah.
He said the Office of the Attorney General, Todd Blanche being the Deputy Attorney General, instructed him not to disclose whether or not this declination memo existed.
Now, I want to just say how, back to our Black Knight metaphor, this was not the topic of the hearing. Neither of the two things that you and I just talked about were the topic of the hearing. We were supposed to be in a hearing today about a major hearing, about whether the motion to dismiss the indictment for vindictive and selective prosecution brought by Comey, based primarily on all the conduct that Donald Trump and the Department of Justice and the social media posts, Pam Bondi, you must now bring it against Shifty Shift and Letitia James and against James Comey, and use Lindsey Halligan, she likes you. That September 20th or 30th social media post, which has now been revealed by the White House, that was not supposed to be a social media post, was supposed to be a direct message to Pam Bondi. This was supposed to be about whether there was proper grounds to find that there was vindictive prosecution, not about whether Lindsey Halligan effed up her indictments, not about whether the Brady material of this exculpatory defense memo, prosecution memo, would be turned over to the defense. Did it ever turn around to become about the vindictive prosecution case?
Most of the arguments were about that. It just took this radical turn. It was one of these days where what everyone thought was going to be the news story, that is to say, the vindictive prosecution motion, that became subsumed by the bigger news that we might not have a valid indictment. And to your point about this, the Black Knight, Monty Python nature of this, there are so many different grounds on which this case can be dismissed. This can be dismissed before Thanksgiving. If another judge finds that Lindsey Halligan was unlawfully appointed, it can be dismissed. If the judge finds that this case was vindictively prosecuted, it can be dismissed. If the judge finds that this indictment was never a lawful indictment, it can be dismissed. If he finds that Ted Cruz's questioning back in 2020, which is the basis of this indictment, where it was too ambiguous, or if that James Comey's answers were literally true. There are so many viable defenses here, and every time this goes to an argument, another jaw-dropping revelation occurs.
Okay, let me take it from by the way, that cadence that you just used reminded me, I'm Jewish, reminded me of being like in synagogue during a high holy day. It was just like this list of things, like, and then God sent the frogs, and then God sent,
if it wasn't enough, Dayenu. If he wasn't vindictively prosecuted, Dayenu. If he wasn't hit with a phony, illegitimate indictment, Dayenu. There's so many bases.
So on that note, on that long list of things about that have gone wrong, I've always put it in my perspective for the audience. I've been a senior lawyer type like a Todd Blanche type for a long, long time. I've trained and worked with junior lawyers on my team. Now, if I would imagine the checklist here, all right, what's the matter that's in court next week? We've got the indictment, the grand jury process for the indictment of a former FBI director of the United States, who's also in his own right a former U.S. attorney. Okay, who do we have up for that? We were thinking about sending in Lindsey Halligan. I'm sorry, who is that again? Oh, we just made her an associate yesterday, boss. Has she ever been in federal court before? No. Has she ever been a federal prosecutor before? No. Has she ever done a grand jury proceeding in any type before? No. And who's going in with her? No one. We're sending her in alone. Why isn't anybody from the office going with her? Why aren't I going with her? Why aren't you going with her? Why isn't a seasoned career prosecutor from some office somewhere, including Todd Blanche? Why is nobody sitting with her in the process to make sure this goes right, including from a constitutional presentation standpoint? And then I would sit back and listen.
So, right, and you would think that for a case of this magnitude, you dot every T, cross every I. There is not a single cross T. There is not a single dotted I. It brings you the point of what this hearing was supposed to be about. With vindictive prosecution, there was one thing that Donald Trump said that very much interested the judge. It was his comments to the press right before the indictment, saying that if he's guilty, fine. If he's not guilty, fine. We need to bring this case now. And he questioned Halligan's assistant, Tyler Lemons. Is that what they instruct you in the Justice Department manual? That if he's not guilty, fine, that's how you go about it? Or are you instructed that you bring a case if you feel that you can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? So that really showed the ethos of it. There was a great moment. I just want to add this one where he asked point blank that whether the defense argument was that Lindsey Halligan was a stalking horse or a puppet, and it led to a line by Tyler Lemons vigorously denying that she is not a puppet, she is not a stalking horse. She used her independent prosecutorial discretion.
How hard did you bite your tongue when Tyler Lemons, without any evidence or any support, nakedly argued that his boss, Lindsey Halligan, is independent and that the indictment was not brought because of a command, a fiat by Donald Trump? How was there snickering?
It was incredible. It was an incredible line. I mean, she was in there for 3 days. Before bringing this to the grand jury. She was in there after Trump explicitly ordered this prosecution twice. He had to play the hand he was dealt, and he gave that line.
Wow.
But stalking horse and puppet are the words of the day offered by Judge Nachmanov, asking if that was indeed the defense position.
I also love the fact that you're in the courtroom, so you know how to pronounce the judge's name. I've been saying it wrong all this time. Unless I thought it was Nachmanoff, but you're saying it's Nachmanoff.
Yes, yes.
Very important. Pick this up on Legal AF, folks. How to say the judge's names right. So what's the next? Let's just end the video today here with this breaking news that you're reporting on, giving our audience a little bit of guidelines. In about 2 or 3 hours, Judge Nachmanoff ordered the Department of Justice to file an explanation as to why the second indictment was not seen by all of the grand jurors before signing, right? That's happening later today.
Right. That's happening later today.
So you and I'll report back on that when that happens in Substack Live or otherwise. That's one. 2, he said with that, he's going to take some time, but I think that certainly means, I don't know, next 10 days to make the ruling on this particular motion, right?
On vindictive prosecution. He didn't give a timeline, and it's now a race to see what actually leads to the dismissal of the case. If that's where this is going, is it disqualification first, or is it going to be under vindictive prosecution? He also ordered at the end of the hearing briefing on a DC Circuit precedent on this very issue of the new of the potential defect in the grand jury indictment. There's apparently a DC Circuit precedent on it, and he has ordered both parties to brief it.
Yeah, I'm putting together some assets here. I'm looking at photos of Tyler Lemons. Poor Tyler Lemons. It looks like he played football for Davidson. He doesn't need this. He just wanted to do his job, and then he's stuck looking at his shoelaces while a federal judge grills him and makes him a witness ultimately for the defense. And you're right. Judge Curry's going to make her decision on whether Lindsey Halligan was illegally appointed and the remedy for that. There's going to be a remedy, and that's going to be before Thanksgiving. She's promised us that. But we now see how all of this gets woven together. When you lie or don't tell the truth in one court in a related matter, it gets picked up by the judge and by the advocates in the other case. So if this goes down, which it looks like it will, this would be two birds killed with one stone. With the filing by Lindsey Halligan of her declaration last week with Judge Curry, with Pam Bondi backdating a ratification, then being used by Judge Fitzpatrick, picked up by Judge Nachmanoff to get rid of the indictment forevermore. That's the thing I want to leave with if this indictment is found to have been procedurally defective and void ab initio at the start, then there is no indictment and the time has run for this case. That's why this case was always a piece of you-know-what, because it never should have been brought. The career prosecutors said it should never have been brought. And there were just, hours left on the clock to bring it before the running of the statute of limitations.
That's right. That's right. And so it's really, I think I've said this before while standing in front of this courthouse with you, that they call this court the rocket docket, and this could wrap up very quickly. It could wrap up by Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. We have Adam Klasfeld, all Rise News. As I've joked with him before, his competitive advantage in all of YouTube is to be in the courtrooms and the courthouse, and now reporting for them, not just what he does on his All Rise Substack and on his website and newsletter, but now reporting regularly on Legal AF on YouTube. You can get to see what people are like. What does Adam Klasfeld look like? You now know. He's doing 6, 7, 8 videos a week. He's in the courtrooms. Where you going to next, Adam?
Going to Greenbelt, Maryland for 2 days of another high-profile hearing. We're going to find out what happens to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, whether a federal judge will block his deportation to Liberia after the government tried to send him to 3 other African nations that he has no connection to. They are now trying to send him to Liberia. There's an evidentiary hearing tomorrow, Thursday, in a federal court in Greenbelt, Maryland. That same court on Friday, there will be another hearing in the case of John Bolton.
So you're going to camp out in that courtroom in Maryland, and I'd love to get you back on here for some briefing of our audience as things continue there.
That sounds wonderful. Looking forward to it.
You as well. Michael Popok, Adam Klasfeld coming together here to report in real time, as you can see, in front of the courthouse in the Eastern District of Virginia in the James Comey prosecution. You'll see the headlines, but I think you want to hear it from somebody like Adam directly. Skeptical judge, indictment on life support. I already see the headlines that are up, but I'm glad you're able to do it and brief our audience about it. Until next time, take a moment, hit the free subscribe button. We're going to cross that 1 million subscriber threshold, probably, if it's not before Thanksgiving, certainly before Hanukkah, to continue our thematic today. And so until our next report, Adam Klasfeld and Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.